The View studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear on the panel to discuss his latest film, a drama exploring themes of redemption and community healing in urban America. It had been pitched as a conversation about storytelling, the power of cinema to inspire change, and his decades-long commitment to mentoring young actors. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Denzel's publicist had been very specific about keeping the conversation focused on his artistic work and charitable foundation. The View's producers had agreed, or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of the producers whispered something to Sunny Hostin about pushing him on his political silence and getting him to address his privilege. And Sunny's entire approach shifted. The atmosphere in the studio was charged with expectation. Crew members moved with unusual tension, knowing they were potentially about to witness something explosive. The lighting seemed harsher than usual, designed to capture every expression, every microreaction. The familiar set felt different, more like a courtroom than a talk show, more like an interrogation chamber than a place for friendly conversation. When Denzel finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous and respectful. The audience knew they were in the presence of greatness. 2 Academy Awards, countless nominations, a career spanning 4 decades of excellence. Denzel wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his presence commanding without effort, radiating the kind of dignity that had made him one of America's most respected actors. He waved graciously, his signature humility on full display, but there was something in his eyes, a wariness that suggested he sensed the trap being set. Whoopi started with appropriate reverence. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Denzel Washington." "Denzel, welcome back to The View. It's always an honor to have you here." Denzel smiled warmly, but his media-trained instincts were already picking up subtle cues in the room's energy. He said, "Thank you, Whoopi. Always good to be here with you all. I appreciate the invitation." Joy Behar jumped in with genuine enthusiasm. She said, "Denzel, your new film deals with some heavy themes: forgiveness, community, second chances. What drew you to this particular story?" Denzel's eyes lit up with passion, his guard dropping slightly as he moved into comfortable territory. He said, "You know, Joy, I'm always interested in stories about human transformation. This film explores how people can overcome their past mistakes and find ways to give back to their communities. It's about hope, really. It's about showing that no matter where you come from, no matter what you've done, you can always choose to be better." Sarah Haynes leaned forward with interest. She said, "The film has been praised for its authentic portrayal of urban communities. How important was it to get those details right?" Denzel nodded thoughtfully, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. He said, "Extremely important. We worked with community leaders, former gang members who've turned their lives around, mothers who've lost children to violence. You can't tell these stories honestly without listening to the people who've lived them. You can't fake authenticity." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Too many Hollywood films about urban communities are made by people who've never set foot in those neighborhoods, never had real conversations with the people they're portraying. We wanted to do better than that." For about 15 minutes, the conversation flowed beautifully. Denzel discussed his preparation for the role, spending months in community centers and youth programs, working with local community organizations, and the importance of authentic representation in Hollywood. The audience was captivated, hanging on his every word as he shared stories from set and spoke about the transformative power of storytelling. His voice carried genuine emotion as he described meeting a young man who had turned his life around after a prison sentence. He told me that seeing positive black male role models on screen had given him hope when he had none. "That's why this work matters. That's why getting it right matters. Then Sunny Hostin decided to change direction. She said, Denzel, you've built an incredible career and amassed significant wealth and influence. Yet you've been relatively quiet on many political issues affecting the communities you portray. Don't you feel a responsibility to use your platform more actively? A subtle shift occurred in Denzel's posture. His media instincts kicked in, recognizing the pivot from art to politics, from substance to gotcha journalism. He said carefully, I believe in using my platform thoughtfully, Sunny. I do a lot of work behind the scenes, mentoring young people, supporting educational programs, funding scholarships. Not everything needs to be public. Sunny pressed forward with a sharper tone, her voice taking on the prosecutorial edge that had made her a formidable legal analyst. She said, but when Black lives are being lost to police violence, when voting rights are under attack, when systemic racism is killing people, isn't silence complicity? The temperature in the room began to shift. The other hosts sensed the conversation moving into dangerous territory. Denzel's diplomatic smile became more strained, his years of experience dealing with hostile interviews evident in his controlled response. He said, I don't think I've been silent, Sunny. I've spoken out when I felt I could be effective. But I also believe in doing the work, not just talking about it. There's a difference between activism and performance. Sunny's voice took on a lecturing tone, the kind she'd perfected during years of legal practice and television commentary. She said, but Denzel, you have a level of respect and influence that could move mountains. Your silence on critical issues sends a message to young Black people that maybe these fights aren't worth having. Denzel's jaw tightened slightly, his famous composure beginning to crack under the weight of the accusation. He said, Sunny, I think you're making assumptions about my activities and my impact based on what you see in the media. There's a lot of work being done that doesn't require press conferences. The audience was getting uncomfortable. Some were shifting in their seats. Others looked confused about why a celebration of artistic achievement had turned into a political interrogation. The familiar warmth of the view had evaporated, replaced by something colder and more confrontational. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to bridge the growing tension. She said, Denzel, maybe you could share some of the behind-the-scenes work you're doing. But Sunny wasn't done. Her voice carried the conviction of someone who believed she was fighting for justice, even as she attacked someone who had spent decades doing exactly that work. She said, I appreciate charitable work, but when the house is on fire, you don't quietly donate to the fire department. You sound the alarm. Your privilege comes with responsibility. That's when something fundamental shifted in Denzel's demeanor. Not anger, but a steely resolve that came from 40 years of dealing with people who questioned his commitment to his community. The diplomatic mask he'd worn for decades began to slip. He said slowly, each word measured and deliberate, my privilege? Sunny, let me tell you about privilege. Privilege is sitting at this table every day lecturing people about what they should be doing while you collect a paycheck for having opinions. The studio went completely quiet. You could hear the cameras whirring, the slight hum of the studio lights. Sunny looked stunned, clearly not expecting such a direct response. Denzel continued, his voice controlled but intense, carrying the weight of decades of real experience versus years of television commentary. I've been working in inner-city communities since before you knew what activism was. I've mentored hundreds of young actors, funded dozens of educational programs, and supported countless families in crisis. But because I don't tweet about it or hold press conferences, you think I'm silent. He stood up slowly, his full presence commanding attention, every inch of his 6 feet 1 inch frame projecting the authority that had made him one of Hollywood's most respected figures. You want to talk about privilege? I earned every opportunity I've had through preparation, dedication, and refusing to accept limitations. You talk about responsibility? I take responsibility for my actions, my choices, and my impact every single day. Sunny tried to interrupt, her legal training kicking in as she attempted to regain control of an argument that was slipping away from her. She said, "Denzel, I'm not attacking your character." "Yes, you are." Denzel's voice filled the studio, carrying the passion that had made him one of the greatest actors of his generation. "You're attacking my character because my activism doesn't look like yours. You're questioning my commitment to my community because I don't perform it for cameras." The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the raw honesty and power of the confrontation. This wasn't the friendly interview they'd expected when they'd gotten dressed up to attend the view. Denzel walked around the table, his movement deliberate and powerful, each step carrying the weight of 4 decades in the spotlight. "Let me tell you something, Sunny. I've been fighting racism longer than you've been alive. I've opened doors, broken barriers, and created opportunities. But I did it through excellence, not through complaints." His voice rose with controlled intensity, the kind of passion that had won him Academy Awards and the respect of peers across the industry. "You sit here every day dividing people, creating conflict, spreading negativity. You call it activism. I call it destructive." Whoopi tried to intervene, her own decades of experience recognizing that this was spiraling beyond what anyone had anticipated. She said, "Denzel, maybe we should take a breath." "No." Denzel turned to face her, his eyes blazing with the kind of intensity that had made him legendary. "No breaths. No timeouts. She wants to question my commitment to my community? Let's have that conversation." He faced Sunny directly, the full force of his presence focused on her like a laser. "What have you built, Sunny? What opportunities have you created? What barriers have you broken? You've made a career out of pointing fingers and assigning blame. That's not activism. That's performance." Sunny's composure was cracking, her usual confidence shaken by the directness and passion of his attack. She said, "I've used my platform to raise awareness." "Awareness." Denzel laughed, but there was no humor in it, only the bitter recognition of someone who had heard these empty phrases too many times. "Sunny, awareness without action is just noise. You raise awareness about problems while I've been solving them." He gestured emphatically, his movements carrying the passion that had made him one of the most compelling screen presences in history. "You want to know what real activism looks like? It's the young man from South Central who just graduated from NYU on a scholarship I provided. It's the single mother in Harlem who opened her own business with funding from my foundation. It's the former gang member who's now directing films because I gave him his first opportunity." The studio was electric. Denzel's passion was overwhelming, his conviction absolute, his authenticity undeniable in a world of manufactured outrage and performative activism. "But none of that matters to you because it doesn't fit your narrative. You need black men to be angry, to be victims, to be constantly complaining. Well, I'm not playing that role." Sunny made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the conversation. She said, "I'm not asking you to be angry." "Yes, you are." Denzel roared, his voice carrying the accumulated frustration of decades of being told how to be black, how to be an activist, how to use his success. "You're asking me to perform rage for your audience's entertainment. You want me to be the angry black man so you can feel better about your own activism." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, the movement decisive and final. "I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this show. I'm done with people who think they can lecture me about my responsibilities to my community." As he put on his jacket with the dignity of a man who had never compromised his principles for anyone's comfort, he delivered his final, devastating assault. "You know what's really hurting the black community, Sunny? It's not police brutality. It's not voter suppression. It's people like you telling young black people that they're victims, that the system is rigged, that they can't succeed through hard work and excellence." He walked toward the exit, his stride purposeful and dignified, every step carrying the authority of someone who had actually done the work rather than just talked about it. "I've spent 40 years proving that we can overcome any obstacle, break any barrier, achieve any goal. You spend every day telling people why they can't." At the door, He turned back one final time, his voice carrying across the studio with the force of 4 decades of achievement, of barriers broken, of young lives changed. That's the difference between us, Sunny. I build people up. You tear them down. I create hope. You spread despair. I solve problems. You just complain about them. His final words rang out with the authority of someone who had lived what he preached. To every young person watching, don't let them convince you that you're a victim. Don't let them tell you that success isn't possible. Don't let them turn you into a professional complainer like some of the people at this table. The studio erupted as Denzel walked out with his head high, leaving the hosts in stunned silence. Sunny looked visibly shaken, her usual confidence completely shattered. The other hosts seemed unsure how to respond, their practiced television personas inadequate to the moment. The audience was divided, some applauding wildly for a man who had refused to be lectured about his own community, others sitting in shocked silence at the intensity of what they had witnessed. Whoopi tried to salvage the moment. She said, "Well, that was passionate. We'll be right back." But the damage was done. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. Hashtag Denzel destroys the view exploded across social media. The video of his passionate defense of his approach to activism was shared millions of times. From his car, Denzel posted a simple statement. Real change happens through action, not lectures. Real progress comes from building up, not tearing down. Real activism creates opportunities, not just noise. The response was overwhelming. Fellow actors, directors, and community leaders rallied behind him. But more importantly, young people across the country shared their own stories of being inspired by his example rather than his politics. At a film festival the following week, Denzel was asked about the incident. He said calmly, "I don't regret standing up for my approach to making a difference. There are many ways to serve your community. Mine has always been through creating opportunities and inspiring excellence." The revolution wasn't just in an actor defending his record. It was in exposing the difference between performative activism and productive action. It was in proving that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is focus on solutions instead of problems. It was in showing that success and service aren't mutually exclusive, they're complementary. Denzel Washington didn't just walk off the view that day. He walked away from a culture that mistakes noise for progress, complaints for activism, and performance for substance. He proved that sometimes the most important voice is the one that builds rather than tears down. And he showed that true leadership isn't about having the right opinions. It's about getting the right results. Because that day, Denzel Washington reminded everyone that actions speak louder than words. Work matters more than wokeness. And creating change is more powerful than just talking about it.